How many of you are germ phobic, afraid of bacteria, won't shake hands, use a public bathroom, afraid to open a doorknob? What about, oh, damn it, how many of you, how many of you have a 2-second rule or a 5-second rule? The germ phobics of you probably have a minus 2-second rule. Now, when I got interested in germs, I realized I had kids, and what happens with kids? They go to daycare centers. Is there a better way to spread viruses and bacteria than daycare centers? So I used to call these, my uneducated me, called these germ sharing centers. But I was wrong. I was wrong. Now, yeah, I mean, it looks like germ sharing centers, but what it really is, these have become immune enhancement centers. Kids get socialization, they get supervision, and they get a chance to work a muscle, and that muscle is their immune system. And I think even though the first year is really bad because they're sick every day, they become healthier young adults and adults. There is, in fact, a home health hygiene hypothesis that says that kids that are raised in nearly sterile homes, very clean homes, don't do as well and have more allergies, more bronchitis, more asthma. So I don't think there's anything better than daycare centers for getting your kids a healthy body. Now, if you're not scared of bacteria, what you have to do is watch television. When they do news stories about bacteria, we found 63 bacteria on a keyboard. We found 75 on a telephone. We found, the subway handles or gas pump handles. Now, my take to that, you guys, oh my God, there's bacteria. I go, they used a lousy lab. There were probably 60,000. They didn't get them all. But one of my favorites was like 3 weeks ago, because we're in respiratory season, right? Don't touch, and I'm challenging you to do this for the rest of just my talk, not the ones after or even tonight. Don't touch, and I see somebody already doing it, don't touch your nose, your mouth, or your face, because it's respiratory season. What you have to understand is bacteria are the dominant species on the earth. They've been here for roughly 4 billion years. We came from bacteria. Bacteria are important. They're part of us. And the way I like to look at bacteria is compare them to humans. So that I think most humans are good. 99, where did I get this number? I don't know where I got this number. But I think most bacteria are good. Now, we know there are humans that are good, but, I just happened to see the wallet. I'm a federal worker, and, I didn't have any money, haven't been paid, so I stole the credit cards. That can happen. And there are bacteria that are good, that live in your intestine. But if they can sneak out of your intestine and get to your urethra, to the bladder, to the kidney, to the bloodstream, that's a good bacterium that's gone bad. So you'll have a urinary tract infection and even a bloodstream infection. But there's there's actually 2 different types of bacteria that live in your intestine that make it to your bloodstream occasionally, and that's actually good. Because they're like canaries in a coal mine. They're sentinel bacteria. And if those show up in your blood, and in my lab, I run a lab, I find them, I call your doctor and say, well, your patient has this, but more importantly, work up your patient for colon cancer. Because those organisms show up often before you have signs and symptoms and you have any idea that you have colon cancer. So those are even good bacteria that have bad part but are actually doing good. And then, of course, we know that there are some really bad people in the world, and there are, in fact, really bad bacteria. I don't want to say all bacteria are good. We have flesh-eating strep and tuberculosis and all of these staph infections, so there are bad bacteria. But let me put this in a different perspective. You're more bacterial, quantitatively, than you are human. You have 10 times more bacteria in you and on you than you have human cells. You have 23,000 genes as a human. You have about 1 million genes that are provided by those bacteria. And if you take, or if you want to do something interesting, first look in the mirror. Because if you take, I think you do that occasionally, if you take all the bacteria in your body and weigh them, they weigh 3 pounds. What other organ, and I used organ because I consider all of your bacteria an organ system, weighs 3 pounds? Your brain. So your bacteria, in my mind, and in many studies that are coming out now, are as important in their own way as your brain. So what do all of these bacteria do? Well, they're digesting your food. They control your weight for both gain and loss. They regulate parts of your immune system. By being there, they keep other bacteria out. And every organism in you and on you is there for a reason. There's a specific binding and receptor site. It's not by chance. One of the things that bacteria do is they make vitamins. A lot of your vitamins are made by the bacteria in your intestine. Now, I have a favorite term. It's called a mind fart. A mind fart is an idea that slips out, and I was thinking about something one day, very unusual. And I wanted to know, in ritual Jewish circumcision, why 8 days? Doesn't seem very biblical. 7 days is like more of a biblical number. And I asked wise men, rabbis, moyals, and I couldn't get an answer. And then I figured it out. You're born sterile, but you're very quickly colonized by bacteria, often from the mother, in that the bacteria, I said they can make vitamins. Well, one vitamin they make is vitamin K2. Vitamin K2 is very, very important in blood clotting. And without it, you'll bleed. So my theory, and this is an awful theory, is that, I don't know who came up with circumcision, but here it is, day one, the moil, the holy men, they're all there, had a boy, we're so happy, and the baby bled to death. Oy, this isn't very good. We got to wait a day or two. Waited like a day or two. Some of the babies bled. So, make a long story short, because I only have 3 more hours, is that it was probably day 8 when the holy man and the moil said, thank God nobody has bled to death. So I think that's how it happened. So to get serious for a moment, there are good bacteria and there are bad bacteria. And bad bacteria were worse than they were, but now they're bad again because we couldn't treat them until 75 years ago. We didn't have antibiotics. So you could cut off a limb or do something dramatic. You can drain things, but we had no treatment. But all of a sudden, we had this gentleman who came along, Fleming. Now, Fleming was a great scientist, but even good scientists get contamination. And on the bottom of that plate are colonies of staphylococcal bacteria. And on the top of that plate was this awful, ugly, contaminating mold called penicillium. Now, he wasn't the first scientist to have a contaminated plate, but he was the first scientist to ask the right question, and that's what good science is all about. Why aren't my bacteria growing near that mold? So he took up this charge of trying to isolate this compound from the mold, which he called penicillin. And the sad part is, after about 7 years, he quit. And the project was turned over in England to an Australian Rhodes Scholar, Howard Florey, a Jewish-German biochemist, Ernest Chain, who was fleeing the Nazis, and a scale guy who could take things from small scale to large scale, Norman Heatley. And they took over the project and were doing very well and having some success after a number of years. But the Germans started bombing around their lab. And they were so scared that their lab was going to be blown up that this fabulous book by Eric Lax, The Mold in Dr. Florey's Coat, what he did on purpose was contaminated his lab coat. So when they went home, if the lab were blown up, they would have the mold and they could start over again. This is really a true story. But the bombing got so bad that Heatley and Florey came to the United States to meet with our government to get permission to travel the country to try to talk the pharmaceutical world into making this new molecule, which they had made a little of, called penicillin. And there was some success, and the United States government realized the importance, but we then got into the war. And making penicillin was on the list, but not a high priority. That all changed on November 28th, 1942, when the Coconut Grove nightclub in the south end of Boston burnt down. 492 people died. And some of the burn victims went to Boston City Hospital, now Boston Medical Center, and some went to Mass General. At Mass General was a well-known surgeon named Oliver Cope. And he had been working with burns since Pearl Harbor, which was now about a year earlier. And he had heard about penicillin, so he called the government to get permission to call Merck, who was working on penicillin, to see if he could get some scent, because burnt skin is a nice growth media for bacteria, and burn patients get infections, and he wanted to try this new drug. And he got permission. The Globe the next day, the Boston Globe, said a supply of a yet unnamed drug was rushed for victims of the fire. They used unnamed because we knew we had German U-boats and German spies, and we didn't want them to know about this drug. So it was used for some of these victims. In fact, 40 years after the fire, in Yankee Magazine, which I know you all read because here we are in Natick, the fire that made penicillin famous. The war wasn't going well. We needed good news, and this was the good news. By 1943, just a few months later, the United States government made the production of penicillin the second highest war priority, only second to development of the bomb. And this was one of my favorite posters. I work at the VA hospital, I've worked with veterans for 36 years, so this touches home. But thanks to penicillin, he will come home. And although that's a great poster, this is my favorite. Although it's the mailbox that I don't want to have in my neighborhood. And it really, hey, honey, we got a new mailbox. Did you know? It's not even true. It actually doesn't cure it in 4 hours. But it wasn't gonorrhea that it was credited with saving all these lives. It was really penicillin that was credited with saving the lives of many of our soldiers. So it was great stuff. And then it was a great time for antibiotics. 25 years, one new antibiotic after another. I mean, does it get better than this? Well, for me, it turned out to be a real bummer. I graduated college in 1967, microbiology major, looking for a job in a hospital diagnosing infections and learning about antibiotics. And this jerk, William Stewart, Surgeon General of the United States, the time has come to close the book on infectious diseases. We have basically wiped out infection in the United States. Bummeroony. Hey man, I'm looking for a job and I got nothing to do. But I've been studying bacteria for about 3 years at that point. And I knew bacteria weren't going to take antibiotics sitting down. I told you, they're the dominant species on the earth. You don't knock off the dominant species on the earth that easily. So this is the Karate Kid. I changed his head. That's what's called a Gram stain. And that's exactly what gonorrhea looks like under the microscope. So this is the Karate Kid with the clap leading. So the Karate Kid with the clap is leading the revolution. The bugs fight back. And if you think about antibiotic resistance, it doesn't get easier. Just picture this. We're trying to kill bacteria. Their sole interest in life is eating and reproducing. So they're trying to eat and reproduce. What would you do if someone were trying to kill you while you were trying to eat and reproduce? That's simple. But bacteria, give them a little, well, not this light, but give them some candlelight, nice music, nice growth media, warm them up a little bit, and they multiply every 15 minutes. And in a way, they're like our children. They make mistakes on purpose just to annoy us. But their mistakes are called mutations. And what if one mutation could keep that antibiotic from working? Then that cell lives, the other cell dies, that gets it on every 15 minutes, and then it's the dominant population. So what did we end up with? We ended up with organisms that learned to become antibiotic resistant. So let's blame somebody. We're really good at blaming people. Well, look in the mirror again. Look around the world. Doc, if you don't give me an antibiotic, I'm gonna die. My child has an ear infection. I need that bubble gum medicine. What do you mean you're not gonna treat it anymore? And then we started putting antibiotics because they make animals grow faster and fatter. So that all got into the environment. And then we had, this is like, you have to have a least favorite antibiotic. At least I had a. It's not right, it's hipper. I can't say how many of you had a Z-Pak. You know who you are, and you're already raising your hand. Thank you. This isn't even a great, it's a great antibiotic for certain things, but for respiratory infections, it's not necessarily a great antibiotic. For some, but not for others. But you got it, and you felt better in 2 hours. Wow, my sinusitis is gone, my headache's gone away, the fluid's flowing, the membranes have shrunk. So you call the doctor or the nurse back and you tell them it's the best thing since Swiss cheese, sliced bread, whatever. So what do? They give it to somebody else. Why it worked? It's a very powerful anti-inflammatory. So everything shrunk, fluid started to flow, and it all worked. But it actually turns out that it wasn't the antibiotic effect. It turns out that 33% of Americans in a poll recently think that antibiotics work against viruses, and they don't. So we're losing the fight. We have more and more antibiotic resistance. You read about superbacteria that are resistant to everything. But not to worry, we have Big Pharma. Big Pharma is running away. It was just an article in the news this morning, running away from antibiotics. You want to invent a drug? Invent Lipitor. You're 40 years old. Hey, I don't like your numbers, your cholesterol, your triglycerides, blah, blah, blah. Take Lipitor. How long do I take it, doc? Until you die. In fact, put some in your coffin. You'll probably look better. I got some friends who take like Viagra 4 times a day now. You don't want to invent an antibiotic? Who do you give it to? Sick people. You've eliminated 99.9% of the people. How long do you take it? A week? Why do you, and then the doctors aren't going to use it because it's going to be expensive and there's going to be a lot of problems. So I felt like I've just given you a lot of bad news. So it's time to give you some good news. What makes us human? What is things that humans do to other humans that they love, care about? We touch, we hug, and we kiss. Is there anything better than kissing? Be it a spouse, significant other, child, your dog, we kiss. So here's the really good news. You have millions of bacteria per drop of saliva. You're really sick, Steve. That can't be good news. Think about it. Bacteria are the dominant species on the earth. We're all here. We have millions of bacteria, actually hundreds of millions. I didn't want to tell you all that. In our mouths. And what do we do to tell somebody we love them? We kiss them. That can't be bad. So you germ phobics out there, either stop kissing or put your money where your mouth is or the other way around. You got to work this out. Now, if you don't now think that bacteria are good, I'm going to tell you about a horrible disease, C. difficile colitis. You get it. Often, the highest risk is taking antibiotics because it kills the good bacteria in your intestine. And then it survives in the environment in the hospital very well, and you ingest it, it gets to the intestine, it goes, hey man, the other guys are gone, let's take over. Makes a couple of toxins, and you can die from this, or get severe diarrhea for a long time. We treat it with antibiotics, and 20% of people fail treatment, and 20% of people relapse. So what do we do with the people who relapse? We give them healthy poop. Fecal transplants. When I started talking about this many years ago, the yuck factor, now I have people who are begging for fecal transplants because you get better. 90 to 95% of people get better in 1 to 2 days when they get a fecal transplant. Now, we do now have a donor center. You know how you can donate blood? I'm not making this up. You can, blood every 6 or 8 weeks. Bring a book, bring a newspaper. You can donate once a day, twice. They screen you're healthy. What I don't like about these donor centers is one of my favorite lines ever was the original donors, before we had these stool banks, were a healthy spouse. Who have you shared more bacteria than with a spouse? So the line that I like to use, it's the only time you should take crap from a spouse. So on that note, I want to tell you to have a healthy respect rather than a fear of your bacteria. I want you to remember what your mama said. Warm water and soap. Wash your hands. Basic, common sense, good hygiene. And remember that, I have to go back for a second. I'm very sorry. I left this out, and this is a dear friend of mine who wrote a book, should have mentioned it a few minutes ago, but The Antibiotic Paradox, How Miracle Drugs Are Destroying the Miracles. He's the man who started the Alliance for the Prudent Use of Antibiotics and has really advanced the field of antibiotic stewardship and appropriate use of antibiotics. But that said, you're now still listening to your mother, and you're doing common sense. Please don't stop hugging appropriately. We have to use those words today. Hugging, touching, and kissing those who are important to you. And do remember, we're all in this together. Thank you. Yeah.